This is the A. I'm Reg Clay.
And Norman G.
This
Do
is
you not
the
have
A.
music?
Oh, no. I pumped that in a little bit later on.
Oh! See, I'm messing stuff up already.
Don't worry about it. This is the A where we talk about life in the theater and the theater of life.
Yay!
Alrighty, and we are sponsored as always by Central Works, a new play theater headed up by Gary Graves and Jan Sleifler. Central Works, reinventing theater one play at a time. As always, we want to thank Central Works for sponsoring the A, and also our wonderful consulting producer, Mallory Samara. Thank you so much, Mallory, for all that you do for the Yay. And we have a wonderful guest, a guest that none of us know. Usually I know a guest or Norman knows a guest. Mm-hmm. But I went online and I saw that someone had won or is a finalist for the 10th annual National Jewish Playwriting Contest. It's her first play that she's written. She wrote it when she was in college, and already she's being recognized. And she is our guest, Olis Krost.
Hello.
Ms. Krost, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you both?
You don't look Jewish.
That's what the whole play is about.
What does a Jew look like? I have a black friend who's Jewish, and I'm like, she totally doesn't look Jewish.
You're friends with Sammy Davis Jr.?
Hey, there you go. Your play is What We Found, and it's on Vimeo, and I have a link to it, but I just took a brief look, but it sounds like an individual has died, and I guess there are siblings who are looking through, I guess, the remnants of the individual who passed away. Is that sort of the substance of the play?
That's pretty much the setup of it is like these cousins have gathered together, and two of them are mixed race and Jewish. One of them is Asian and Jewish. One of them is Black and Jewish. And they're trying to go through like their family home because they're trying to sort out who owns the home, who in the family it's going to, and all of that. When a cousin kind of from their like more estranged side of the family who identifies as white, had no idea they were Jewish, like shows up and like wants all this insight into their family history. And it kind of like is a lot about these three cousins trying to navigate what does it mean to be Jewish, and like how do you define your identity, and especially within family where everyone feels and looks different, which was kind of based a lot of in my experience being Filipino and Jewish and not really feeling like I looked either.
Wow, that is interesting. And the very fact that you are Filipino and Jewish, obviously our good friend Jeannie Baroga, she's writing a book on the Philippine experience, and she's using the Yay as reference, and we can actually introduce you to her because I'm sure she can use your experience. And we'll talk more about that. As I begin every podcast, Norman, how's your week?
I have no idea. Oh, geez. No, I shoot. While we're doing this, I will probably sign up to go get tested because I have to be tested every week for this teaching gig that I have. And I forgot to do it yesterday. And I'm like, oh, crap.
Tested for COVID?
Yeah, tested for COVID.
Even though you're vaccinated? You're fully vaccinated, right?
I am fully vaccinated. The school requires everybody who is coming on campus, unless you just stay in your car. The parents dropping off and picking up don't have to, but everybody else, if you're getting out of your car, you have to be tested. And up until last week, they were doing temperature too. They finally decided they don't need to do that anymore, but we're still masked and we're still taking temperatures. So yeah, I got to get that done. The biggest thing in my week was I've been doing a sculpture class all spring.
As a model, right?
As a model. And that's over now. I am now officially done with that. I should, the thing is I do this on my laptop. I have photos on my phone. I'll see if I can get a photo up and share it.
People like to. I mean, obviously because sometimes you pose naked, and although it's a portrait of
these aren't naked person. No, this was what they called a portrait, and I don't know why it's a portrait when you're sculpting it, but I always heard that called a bust, but maybe they don't like that word. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's one that is that, and then there's one that is standing, full figure. That one I didn't spend as much time on, but it's hard work. And anyway, it's done. So that's my big news for the week.
Now, is that good news or bad news? Because that's no revenue for you, right?
Well, yeah, the last couple of checks will trickle in, and that'll be that. I think it's good news. I mean,
Well, it
I,
frees
a
you up.
long time ago, started identifying as a working artist, and I include everything that is connected to the arts. So in that sense, it's like any art project. At a certain point, you have to say it's done and you got to move on. And
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of sadness about that, but there's also there's the joy of not having to stand for with breaks 3 hours at a time.
Yeah, no, I hear
That's no
you.
fun.
And Mara, I'm sure Mara's happy because she can spend more time with you.
No,
Mara's Jewish as
you
well.
so don't understand how marriage works, and especially marriage
Hey,
in COVID. Marriage
I've
in
been a
COVID,
lifelong
no, you
bachelor, so
actually need excuses for getting out. So that's the other great news is that the alley is open again. So I got to go back there this weekend for
yeah,
my
there you
second
go.
time.
Molly,
I went on opening night, and I'm now making it my regular. If I don't have something else Thursday night, I'm going to drop into the alley. They're
Molly,
every night but Tuesdays and Wednesdays so far.
Molly, do you know anything about the alley? That's it's a piano bar, and it's on in Oakland on Grand Avenue.
Grand Avenue, yep.
Oh, no, that sounds like sort of familiar. It's been a while since I lived in the East Bay. I've been in Daly City for a long time, so I haven't found myself in the East Bay as much anymore.
Do they have any like karaoke or piano bars in Daly City? It's been a while. Go ahead.
I feel like there's karaoke bars, but not really like a good old piano bar. At least not that I've found.
Very few piano bars. There's one in Pacifica, and there might be one in. There might still be one in San Francisco, but there was one that was a regular one, and that I think that shut down with COVID.
Yeah, I think so. There've been a couple of. It's funny that you mentioned about the whole school thing because all through the country, I mean, getting into current events, there's been a lot of just protesting. There was a woman, I forget, I think it's in Texas, but schools are trying to open, but of course there's still the COVID restrictions, and of course children are still not vaccinated. And I think Pfizer and also Moderna are testing their the vaccines to make sure that it's safe for kids. But of course, parents are flipping out. They're like, hey, I want my kid to go to school. Really, they probably just want to not take care of their kids at home anymore so they can either go to work or whatever. And it's gotten really, really, I mean, one woman was called a communist and she was Chinese American, and she was called out, and it's gotten really, really ugly. So there's that going on. There's
a teacher or principal, I think, who sent out the message that you should stay away from everybody who's been vaccinated because they will shed the virus on you.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And they told their teachers that they could not be vaccinated.
That's just ridiculous. Molly, how are you dealing with the I guess the age of COVID? Are you vaccinated, and have you had to deal with any craziness?
I am. I'm vaccinated. I got the Johnson & Johnson shot like a month ago.
Yeah.
I got it on a Friday, and then on a Monday they stopped it.
Oh, right.
Now,
that must have been a weird week when it's like, oh, wait a minute, but I just got this. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So were you worried? I mean, do you feel confident that you're healthy?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident. I'm out of the zone where they said that you're more at risk. But yeah, it was wild on Monday to wake up to a bunch of texts from my family being like, because I was the only one in my family who got the Johnson & Johnson shot. So I had all these texts from all my family members being like, is this the one you got? Are you okay? You better watch out. It's that doesn't help me.
Right.
I can't control what my body's going to do. It's going to do it or it's not going to do its thing.
Right. And it's funny at my work, they have this, there's an app that you have to log into, and they say, were you in contact with anyone who has COVID? And it's like, well, if I'm sitting on a BART or, if I'm, how do I know who has it and who doesn't have it? So it's a little crazy, but I'm hoping that.
I know filling that thing out, I have to fill it out every week. And I'm like, and with all the modeling jobs, I've done a bunch live. So when you asked about the money, I was like, actually, I did a bunch, and there's other modeling gigs coming, but every day you go on campus, you have to fill it out. And it's like, have you been around anybody who has it? Yes, because
Probably.
Right now it's around us.
Yeah.
That's what people don't recognize. It is around us right now.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I'm hoping that as time goes on, it'll be just like the cold or the flu or something like that, and you just take
Polio.
a yearly shot,
Mhm.
sorry, and then we won't worry about it as much.
Mhm.
I mean, I still feel bad for the folks in India, and now it's spreading to other countries surrounding India.
Ooh, yeah.
It's gotten very, very bad there. The Chauvin case. So, oh goodness. Okay, so Derek Chauvin was convicted,
Oh yeah.
but there was a juror who wore a "Get your knees on our necks" "Get your knees off our necks" T-shirt.
Right.
Maybe a year prior to being called as a juror, and that may be grounds for an appeal for the case to be thrown out. So, we'll have to see what the appellate court says about that.
Right.
So I'm a little worried about that. There's the Liz Cheney thing. Liz Cheney is, sort of a GOP, a Republican that I can
She's the
respect
number
because,
3. Yeah.
and the Republicans are trying to get rid of her because they're still in this Donald Trump cult, which is a little
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
Here's a fun one. I always try to get a fun one in. A 4-year-old boy from New York ordered $3,000 worth of SpongeBob popsicles from his mom's Amazon account. So
How does that even happen?
well, hey, listen, these, they make it so easy to make an order. Like now, I received a new, not a new Apple card. I bank with the San Francisco Police Credit Union, and they gave me a card, and they're like, you don't even need to swap. You can just tap it. And of course, with the Apple card, you don't even need the card at all. You just have your phone. So it's so easy to make an order, to hit a button or whatever, that a child can do it. And a child did do it
Mhm.
to the tune of $3,000. So I don't know. I just found that to be fun. That's basically it. And also, I wanted to give a shout out to Kimberly Ridgway. We have a playwright here, Molly, but also Kimberly is also a playwright. We've talked to her about her ad nauseum. She is one of the winners of the 2021 Fade to Black Play Festival in Houston, Texas.
Yay.
She wrote a play called The Contract, and she will be rewarded. I think there's a festival going on in January of 2022 where she
wow.
will be recognized. And I think it's one of the great things about San Francisco, the SF Playground. And Molly, if you don't know about Playground, you really should, because not only
yeah.
you do.
Yeah, I've been in Playground. This is my 3rd year now.
Yay.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Y'all are teammates and didn't even know it.
I know.
Exactly. And the cool thing for those who are listening or who are watching, San Francisco Playground not only sponsors or, will focus on new playwrights, but they will also push the plays that you write. They'll connect you with other organizations throughout the United States where you can submit your plays. I forget what the repository is, but and I'll find out
The
a little bit later.
National Play Network.
Yeah, the National Play Network, and you could submit plays, and throughout the United States, if your play is selected, if it's that you can be recognized, and you can have your play produced in Maine, in Houston, Texas, and I think it's fantastic. It's a really, really wonderful repository. So, in any case, that is it. Molly, let's get into an origin story. How did you first get involved in theater, and where were you born and raised?
I was born in Hayward, and we lived in Hayward. My parents bounced around Hayward and Berkeley, and then down to Anaheim, and then eventually I grew up in Monterey, which is where my grandparents are from. I lived there most of my life. That's where I started doing theater. I started doing regional theater at Pacific Repertory Theater when I was in high school, because my high school I went to a really small high school that didn't really have arts funding, so there wasn't really any type of drama program. So my mom found the PAC rep was 2 towns over, but she was like, "Do you want to go do shows there?" So I did theater there most of my high school time, and I'm still friends with all the people I've met there, and became a theater major. I went to Berkeley, tried to figure out what my whole deal was in theater. I bounced around from costume design. Then I thought maybe I'll just research theater because I'm not a performer. And then I kind of found my way into playwriting with Philip Katanda, and he really just changed my world.
Wow.
Really is such a mentor to me, and
Do you have any siblings?
I have a younger brother.
Okay. Is he
Yeah.
involved in theater at all, or just you?
No, just me. He's a really good artist, though, like a really good graphic artist, and kind of just he got all. My mom's also a really talented artist. She's really great at painting, and I think he got all of her art genes.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of folks who get involved in theater, they first want to, I think as kids, there are a lot of kids. I know for me, I had a lot of energy when I was a kid, and I wanted to just perform and just get on stage, or just, have people look at me. And I always think, just knee-jerk reaction, that that's how everyone gets involved in theater. But you're one of those who you wanted to get involved in theater, but is there a reason why you did not want to be on stage?
I don't know. I don't know if it was like feeling self-conscious about like my own talent ability, because I only really did musicals, and if you can't sing, like not much is happening for you. And like I think I can carry a tune enough to like be in an ensemble, and there's a lot of dancers in my family, and I think like I'm a pretty solid dancer, and so like that made the experience really fun. But I never really got to do like just straight plays, and so I think that really like affected like what my view of theater and performing was. And I kind of had this thought of like, okay, well, I can't be a musical theater performer, so I guess I can't be in theater. Like it wasn't until I got to college that I got to like read any like straight plays.
Oh yeah, like dramas and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you tend towards drama, or let's say comedy, or do you get into some of the other things like I'm thinking Ionesco, or some of the like oh shucks, who wrote No Exit? Sartre?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you get into, or do you get into drama? I mean, what type of theater sort of do you gravitate towards?
I tend to do a lot of, I think as a whole, it's a lot of like family dramas, but it kind of is imbued with humor, which I kind of feel is very much like the Filipino experience, is to kind of inject humor into everything, especially like in the serious and heavy situations, to like always find lightness and laughter, even if it's a bit darker. And I think that's kind of carries itself through all of my plays.
Very, very cool. You mentioned Philippine theater. We talk ad nauseum about Bindlestiff. Do you know anything about Bindlestiff Studios?
Yeah, I've seen their shows and stuff, and like Conrad and I are actually from the same hometown.
Conrad Panganaban.
Yeah.
Right on.
Which was like wild. And when I first looking at grad school and I got into SF State, I ended up getting connected to him, where we found out that like we both grew up in Monterey, and like both are Filipino playwrights. And so he introduced me to Bindlestiff.
Very, very cool. Have you submitted anything to them, or have you been involved in any of their things?
I've submitted to Stories High before, and it didn't work out, but like I still like support them and like watch all their shows.
Well, not yet. I mean, I'm assuming there's tons of people who do submit to Stories High. So what was your experience studying in college? Was it a good experience? It sounds like it was.
It was good for the most part. Like it took me a while to figure out being a theater major. I actually started out as a classics major. I like was really into mythology growing up also. And once I realized I couldn't be like a performer, I thought like, okay, maybe I'll be like a researcher, and hated every second of it. Like I actually ended up like my junior year was in Washington, D.C. interning at a museum, which is what I thought I wanted to do with my life, and was super, super miserable. And I was talking to the advisor of the like internship program I was doing, and she was like, well, you're taking our theater elective, and why don't you ask the teacher if you can intern at his theater? And this was at Theater J, which is a Jewish theater in Washington, D.C. So I asked him, and he was like, sure, you can come intern for us for like a couple months. And that is like where it all really clicked of like, oh, duh, I've loved theater my whole life. Why don't I try to be in theater? So then I came back to Berkeley and like really like channeled in as a theater major and tried out all the different classes to figure out where like my niche fit in. And like I took playwriting with Philip Katanda, I think my junior year. whenever I took it with him, that's when like it all fell into place. And I feel like my theater trajectory like opened up in my eyes.
Very, very nice. Now I have a question, and it really doesn't deal with theater, but I'm just curious because the Philippine community is so Catholic based. I mean, I had a girlfriend who was Filipino, and the Philippines that I've talked to have, almost always been Catholic or probably agnostic or really not really religious at all. What is it like being a Filipino Jewish person?
It's really interesting because my mom is still religious, but I think of all of her family members, she was like the least religious in terms of like imbuing it onto us, like because my dad is like Jewish and like was raised like very religiously Jewish. They both had this approach of like, we'll let you figure out what you want, but like they were still very like open about their beliefs and their traditions. So we kind of like did both, like grew up doing both Jewish and both like Christian Catholic holidays. And like when I'm with like my Filipino family, like, we still have prayer over all the meals. And like when I go to advice, they'll still point me in like directions of different like Bible passages, which don't necessarily like resonate with me in the same way. But like, as I've gotten older, I think I've started to understand like religion more as like a way that it's shaped like my family's worldview and like how it's shaped their values and like how those values have like raised me and made me the person I am today. So I've kind of started to like look at it less as like the religious aspect and more of like a practice that kind of guides their values and their worldview and kind of like their own guidance in life. And I think they've all really respected that as me as well. Like I've had like aunts and stuff like ask me what my relationship with faith is. And I kind of tell them that like, I don't really know. I kind of like the idea of bridging both together and like forming what I can of it. And like they've been very respectful of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to bring Norman in because I'm thinking about Dexter. Norman, I think I know that you're spiritual, but let's say not totally religious. And I know that Mara is Jewish. So with Dexter, I mean, does Mara take the same path with Dexter and say, hey, listen, you find your own path? Or
yeah, very much. Oh, yeah. Very much. No, and to the point of you have to, Jewish, sometimes when people say the word, they mean specifically religious. Sometimes they just mean cultural. You have to be very careful about what you're saying because, she'll push back quick. Oh, no. I don't know about that. I don't care about that. It's like, well, you care about being Jewish. So, okay. You don't care about the practice, the religious practice. And so, no, he's been free to do whatever.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody about that the other day because growing up in Oakland, it's such a mixed community. It's such a diverse community. I'm like, wow, when he gets out in the world, that's going to be a wake-up call.
Yeah, it's interesting with Dexter because he's mixed race. He's half black, half white. And also he's Jewish. So, he's really, he'll have to find his path, and maybe it's not something that he's really concerned about. And it's something that fascinates me about Judaism because it's not just a religion, like people can choose to be Christian or not. But if you're born Jewish, it's really a part of I can't choose to be black. I am black.
Right.
So if you're born Jewish, it's not just a religious choice, but it's also, your ethnicity. And I find that fascinating. Molly, do you find that part fascinating? Because you've written a play about, people dealing with their ethnicity as being Jewish.
No, that it's always something that I'm like always thinking about, especially like having like cousins on my Jewish side who all have like different ethnic identities. So it's the idea of like, how do you form it in your head? Because like to me, I feel the same way that like I'm very culturally Jewish. Like I can't imagine like that part, like that my family without that part of like our identity. And especially like my dad, like I can't imagine him just not being culturally Jewish. Like that's just who he is and like a part of how he was raised and just like a part of our family. And it's just like when it feels just as rich to me as like my Filipino side and identifying as Filipino. And it's like, it's just, yeah, it's always something I've wrestled with, especially like when I was writing this play of like, yeah, how do you define yourself as Jewish? Because it is very complex in that you can kind of decide if you're culturally Jewish, are you spiritually Jewish? Do you practice like religiously? And it's like, I don't know. It's so complex. And like, that's always fascinated me because I feel like I'm always on this like flexible journey of like where I fall spiritually and like becoming open to the idea of like, I don't know where I will be as I grow older in my identity.
Yeah.
And like how I relate.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And, as thinking on the playwright's perspective, when you're writing characters who come from, because it's interesting. There are a lot of people who hang out with people from the same culture, from the same either race or whatever. Like, like you go to a baseball game, everyone speaks, yeah, we're all Giants fans. Or you go to, everyone's sort of there. There are people who speak their own language and do their own thing. And what happens when, let's say, you find yourself as an outsider, you may be Filipino, but you're Jewish. Even if you hang around, let's say, a Jewish community, you're also an outsider.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way sometimes?
Oh, I felt that way my whole life, especially because like my dad's family is in St. Louis and I've been born and raised in California. That's where my mom's family settled down when they came to America. And like I grew up living with my grandparents and then grew up, and like after we moved out of my grandparents' house, we lived with my mom's brother. So I always felt like very immersed with my Filipino family, but also very aware that I don't look Filipino. And like, it's always been like a joke, like a loving joke within the family that I like look white. But I think after like a lot of years that like really sunk into me. And especially like where I grew up, I was the only Jewish kid. Like my dad would come to like my elementary school like every year to like teach everyone about Hanukkah because like there just were not other Jews. And so I kind of always felt a bit of an outsider kind of in both spaces because I never felt like fully Jewish because I didn't really grow up around any Jews, but then didn't really feel fully Filipino because I didn't like look like any Filipinos. Mm-hmm. Like when I went to Berkeley, like I visited when I was a senior because one of like the Filipino student groups, like brought in all the Filipino incoming seniors to come tour the campus and like have like Filipino students like show them around. And I was like one of the first to show up, and like they didn't like recognize I was with their group at first. Like I had to go up to them and be like,
yeah,
hey, I'm registered with you.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I had a question for you as a playwright. I mean, we're talking about, let's say different cultures or whatever, and people who speak, let's say, different languages, different rhythms. As a writer, and this is something that I ask all writers who come on the Yay, what is your method for finding a different voice? How do you write a character that sounds different or feels different? Let's say you have to write a male character. You're not male, you're female. Mm-hmm. What is your technique that you use?
Something I kind of have been doing, like literally since the first class the first playwriting class I ever took was, I remember this, like Professor Katanda was just like, write a monologue from the point of view that someone is not you. And so I just chose my brother and like wrote a monologue about how I thought about how he viewed painting. And then like next he was like, okay, write a different monologue of like someone responding to them that is also not you. And I think like that really settled like deeply into my practice of like, so I tend to start out with monologues when I'm trying to figure out who a character is. And I try to let them just like tell me their stream of consciousness of what they're thinking about something. And like, I will sometimes end up like trimming it and taking lines here or there, or sometimes I'll end up keeping the whole thing. But a lot of times it ends up like cut from the script, but it was like a way for me to at least get a look into their brain and kind of figure out like how they're speaking to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was just thinking, have you had to deal with, Have you had any of your plays produced? Let's say even, like in school or like one acts or anything like that?
Yeah, I have had like short plays with Playground. I did Best of Playground, like I think in 2019.
Yeah.
And I've had like
Which play?
It was called After Hubris.
Mm-hmm.
And which was my first year in Playground. So I was like, whoa,
right on. Cool.
And then like I've had like different readings and workshops at like different theaters and stuff in the Bay.
I was going to ask, what is the interaction that you have, let's say, between you and the director or you and other actors? Like, let's say a director may say, well, I don't see where, has it been good or has it been stressful? I know the first time that I ever did a reading of one of my plays, I was told, oh, you got to change this, you got to change that. I don't understand why this character is saying this. I don't even understand why the character's here. And sometimes it can be a bit of a beating, but it's something that I need because I need to rewrite. How has that interaction been for you?
I think I've been pretty fortunate for the most part in that I've been able to work with like really supportive directors. Oh, why did my laptop just go? So sorry. I thought I had everything go off. Okay. I've had like really supportive directors who like have been able to phrase their feedback to me in forms of questions and that like, oh, I'm like struggling to understand why they're acting this way or like why they're saying this.
Mm-hmm.
And that has like, in a way that I'm able to take it and not get hurt. I used to worry that I was too sensitive about like feedback. There was like at one point in grad school that I had some like feedback that like I went home and like cried about it and like worried that I was like, oh no, am I not cut out for this? But I think something that like I learned throughout grad school is how to like listen to feedback. And maybe that's something I learned from Michelle Carter is that like Carter. I love her so much. Like, I think I learned from her is to like, when people are giving you feedback, like on the surface level, listen to what they're saying, but then on a deeper level, ask yourself, is this the reaction you want the audience to be having? Like, is this the questions you want them to be asking about this character or this scene? And if the answer is no, then what do you need to change to have them have the reaction that you want? Which has helped me kind of like separate from feedback that like might like evoke a react like some type of feeling out of me, like if they're saying like, well, I don't like this character because of when they say this, and then I'll think about it and I'm like, okay, is that how I want them to think of that character right now in this scene?
I just had a playwright send me a play and ask me for feedback, and I finally said, well, what are you looking for in the feedback? What were you hoping that I would be able to tell you?
Which is sometimes a hard question. I feel like when I first started, I'd be like, I don't know. I'd be like, I don't know what I'm looking for, like for feedback, because I think when you start out, you just want to be, at least for me, I was like, I don't know. I just want to know if it's good or not. I don't really know anything deeper than that. And I think it actually is like something you have to do a lot of learning to like learn what you're actually like looking for. Like I'm meeting with a dramaturg and a director later from San Diego Rep, and like I'm starting to like think about like, okay, I need to like go in with what I want like to know from the dramaturg, like when they're looking at my script.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Norman, is it your responsibility to be nice to, because I know you've worked a lot with with playwrights. I'm thinking specifically Jeannie Baroga, because you and her have a wonderful relationship where you can be a little rough with Jeannie. You can say,
I don't know. I don't know if she would describe it that way. More than once we have bumped heads and she said, I don't know why you're coming at me that way. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let me take the feelings out of this and try to express what I'm feeling, but not, not have it rooted in, I hate this, or this is stupid. There are other ways to say, I'm not seeing the connection between these. So you've got this going on and this going on. I don't see the connection. I feel like it jumps. Do you get what I'm saying? And yeah, no, the polite thing so far,
because sometimes it could be, being too polite may not help the playwright, because sometimes the playwright may need, direct constructive criticism saying, listen, this isn't going to work.
I would say the base thing that I've recognized in working with playwrights is you really can't tell them what to do. They're going to figure out what they want to do, and that's what they're going to do. So what you're really doing is just feeding back. You're a mirror. You're just sort of saying, oh, I got your baby, and wow, okay, that's big head on your baby. I mean, you find ways to comment on it without, trying to keep it from feeling like a personal attack. But, let them know that structurally, maybe there's some things going on. Or the play that I just read is a historical piece. So it it connects the little dots of these histories. So that this was then, and then this is 10 years later, and then this is a year later, and then this is 6 months later, and on like that. You totally follow that, but you lose the sense of arc. You lose the sense that the character is going on a journey. It's more like this happened to the character. This happened to the character. This happened to the character. Mm. And I'm like, it's kind of episodic was the word I ended up using.
It reminds me. Go ahead.
Because the feedback I got was, well, yeah, I'm hoping I can do more with it. And that was when I came back with so what were you hoping to hear from me? What would be useful for you to hear right now from me? Because I kept saying the character's fascinating. I don't feel, what I kept doing was grabbing every piece of her language and feeding it back. So she said something about the transitions. And I said, we don't get to see the character experience the transitions. And I don't know if you want to do something with that or not, but I feel like that's a missed opportunity that we go through literally about a dozen points in this character's life without ever seeing how point A moved them to point B, moved them to point C. I'm in point A. Well, I used to be in point A. Now I'm in point B. Now I'm in point C. Like, is there any sense of some movement in the character?
Yeah, it reminds me of Maddie May, written by Jeannie. Jeannie has a lot of episodic episodes, and basically it's about I think it's a restaurant, which is in Oakland, and back in
Richmond.
Richmond, and just post World War. I think
it was the end of World War II. Yeah,
exactly. But the cool thing of that Jeannie does, she has one central character that sort of all the other characters sort of revolve around. So that you do have these episodic episodes of, let's say there's a love story that's happening here. There's an old man, young man thing that's happening here.
Site.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The work site, the politics. But there's one person who's in the middle of it all, who sort of pushes everything forward. And there is one central plot. So the audience has something to follow.
Yeah. No, and that's not always what a playwright wants to do. So rather than saying, I see how this could work this way, and offer that up to the playwright, which may not be useful to them. The playwright may want a character who had all kinds of experiences. And if there's a moment of discovery, maybe it doesn't happen until the end of that journey. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways to do it. It may be that person somehow never changed. If you see Being There, the beautiful movie with Peter Sellers.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, my God. That character goes through the whole play almost never responding to anything. You barely cracks a smile. At one point, he has a tear. And at the end of the movie, he steps out into the street, sort of takes in the world the way he always does, and steps away. Forrest Gump, similar kind of thing. You mostly don't see the character changing much. You just see time, how they navigate it through time.
Yeah, for those millennials, Being There, I think was done in '76 with Peter Sellers, is very much a '70s version of Forrest Gump. There was also, it reminds me of Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. Molly, I want to bring you back in. It sounds like when you write a play, do you think character first or plot first? Or does it depend on the play?
It tends to be character, because when I start a play, I usually will have like an image in my mind, like a physical image in my mind. Like with What We Found, it was like an image of like 3 people in a garage sorting stuff. So I just like started there, and I usually I tend to start in the middle of like whatever image I have going on, or like my my other play, Nanai, like I had this image of like sisters baking in a kitchen. So I think like that's almost a mix of character and plot, because it's like, oh, there's some characters doing something. What are they doing and why are they doing it?
Yeah, it takes me back to when I was in school, where a director will say, well, listen, a character has to be doing something. You have an objective, and if you don't fulfill the objective, then bad things will happen. The stakes have to be high. And so I think as an actor, I'm always looking when I get a play, okay, what's the objective? What is my character? What do I need to do? And what are the consequences if I don't do it? And there's some plays where, let's say, the plot is not so strong. So that's why I asked you, if there is a strong plot, do you make sure that the character, whoever the character may be, has an objective that they need to do?
Oh, yeah, I usually tend to, especially because I tend to start in the middle of a character doing something. It's that like, okay, well, I need to figure out like why they're doing this. And usually the process of unraveling why they're there is kind of what unravels the plot and the objective, like both the short-term objective in the scene, like in the play I was talking about, Nanai, like I figured out that like the sisters are baking, and the objective of them baking is like one is trying to distract the other from something. And then like the larger plot became like, okay, what is she trying to distract her from? And like kind of like unburied the story from there.
Oh, very cool. No, yeah, that's fantastic. And it sounds like the audience, they don't even realize what's really, really going on until the middle part of the play. Now, and I think that's fantastic. Business. Well, so one question I have is, how do your parents feel about you getting involved in theater? I'm sure they're like, oh my God,
that was a big question.
Yeah.
They're really proud. They're like, I'm very lucky in that like whatever like my brother and I have wanted to do our whole lives, they'll always like dive in for like head first of like, okay, we got you. Like when I was like a kid and I was like, I want to be an astronaut, they were like, okay, we'll take you to the Sally Ride Festival. And like really like they're very much people of like, okay, if this is what you're into, like you're gonna dive into it and you're really gonna be into it.
No, which is fantastic.
Which is so great to have them be so supportive. But then I think it really like I feel like it makes you like have to be certain of like what you want to do then, because they're like, all right, well, we're going to support you if this is what you want.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And also I guess the business part of playwriting. I mean, a lot of us have day jobs so that we can do our playwriting while we actually pay the bills and all that sort of stuff. But have you thought about, I guess, your playwriting career? I mean, do you want to produce for Broadway? Do you want to transition into film and television? Where do you see yourself in the future?
That's what I'm like kind of trying to figure out now. And I feel like 2020 like threw everything up in the air for me, because I think I started going to grad school with the idea of like, okay, well then I can become a teacher and like I can teach theater or teach playwriting like while I support my writing. And then I graduated last year in May 2020, which was like, okay, nothing's happening. Like,
right.
And so, and like I had like day jobs in fundraising and like nonprofit fundraising. So it made me look longer term at the picture of like, okay, well, maybe it's not the worst thing if I have like a full-time day job to support me, because I can be safe during current and possible future global pandemics. like I think that the idea of like stability became a huge thing for me last year. And like I think I had a very like narrow trajectory of like, okay, I'm gonna just teach playwriting and work in writing, and only really saw myself as a playwright. And I think like having to like be a pandemic writer opened me up a little bit to think of like, okay, what are other things I like to write, and like maybe dream a little bigger, and like watching like all these like different documentaries of like playwrights who became TV writers or who became like film writers. Like I was watching like a Disney Plus documentary of the guy who wrote Soul, the new Pixar movie.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I started as a playwright and then I wrote for Star Trek, and now I'm writing this movie. And I was like, well, that's my dream trajectory because I'm like a lifelong Star Trek fan. Like, I would love to write for Star Trek. Like, I'm in a constant state of rewatching Next Generation.
That's funny.
You should get into the original series. Those are some fun stuff.
I did. When the pandemic started, I was like, I'm gonna watch. I grew up watching the original series and Next Gen with my parents because they're huge Trekkies.
Right.
And then when like the pandemic was starting, I was like, okay, I'm gonna rewatch the whole show all the way through, like original series, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. I'm gonna do it all. And then I've just been rewatching Next Gen because I love it too much.
You know, it's interesting with Star Trek. I mean, it's fascinating how certain periods or certain eras of our time reflect influence writers. So a lot of the original series was written in late 1960s, so it was influenced by the 60s generation, the hippie generation. And you do have a lot of writers who wrote for Rod Serling, who wanted to take science fiction but talk about social issues that were going on during the time. And then, of course, in the 80s, you have a lot of, CGI. And so CGI sort of dominated the next generation, like, what's happening with the hologram and all of that sort of stuff. So I wonder, you mentioned writing in a post COVID-19 or COVID-19. I just wonder how playwrights are being influenced by COVID-19 and the isolation and having to be forced to write for Zoom. There's some who are like, well, the hell with it. I'm just going to write and not deal with Zoom at all. Some who have really transitioned into, okay, I'm going to write specifically for Zoom, and therefore it's more dialogue based. So there's not a lot of action because it's not like you can do via Zoom. Have you had to make that sort of transition?
I've tried. I took the start of pandemic very hard as a writer. Like, I had a really tough time trying to adjust to Zoom writing. Like, I feel like everything kind of shut down when I was in my last semester of grad school, and I was kind of like in the middle of starting a new play that like I thought was going to be like a more traditional stage play, and I had this idea of like combining like, because I'm a very big like tabletop Dungeons and Dragons player. So I was originally working on this idea of like a group of friends who are playing their game, and it's like a hybrid of like their game world and their real world. And I had this idea of like, an in-person stage play. And I spent a long time of like, okay, well, maybe that can work for Zoom because it can be very like, it can be very dialogue based. And like, I just struggled with it for so long that I had to take like 4 months off of not writing at all, just because I don't know, the way I describe it to like other theater people is like, I feel like I picked theater as my medium for a reason, is because I really thrive on the in-person energy of theater and like the connection of an audience and the actors like being in the same room. And I was really like struggling with how to replicate that connection on a screen. And like, I took a break for a long time and then got lucky that I had all these opportunities come for like Zoom readings for plays I had already written. And so like, that's been my window back into theater. And now I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I'm being very stubborn of like holding out of like, maybe I don't have to write for virtual theater, but at the same time, I think virtual theater is very empowering for how accessible it is to so many different audiences. And so like, I feel like I'm at a crossroads of trying to figure out what I do next.
Well, it's a wild time for it. I just had a conversation with a couple of theater people last night, and Central Works, Jan, actually.
Jan Zeifler, yeah.
And we were talking, and she asked, and Richard, actually, we were all together having a chat, which is so weird to be in the world where you can actually hug somebody and go, hi, it's good to see you. But we were talking about it, and she asked him point blank, how do you feel about, she said she hated Zoom theater. He said he did too. And she and I have already had that conversation. She said, what do you think of audio theater? And he said he didn't really like that either. And so I pointed out, it's not about what you're going to do in the long run. these are the opportunities that you have right now. So I was talking about site-specific theater because she also said, I don't really like outdoor theater. And I'm like, well, I don't like putting everything outdoors. No, but at a time when you can't really safely do things indoors, you might want to dust off those old ideas you had about, whoa, wouldn't it be really cool if we could do this next to a tree?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I saw a site-specific Julius Caesar in Golden Gate Park, and I thought I wouldn't like outdoor theater, but it like rocked my world in terms of like outdoor theater, of the idea of like it being immersive and like taking advantage of the space and like moving throughout the park and like it can be really fun if you like have the right approach to it, which, you know, right approach is very subjective to each person, but
well, no, it's going to be each one. My wife was trombonist on that production.
Oh, it was so much fun.
She got a kick because they did two things. They did a Julius Caesar, but they did something else to sort of respond to it.
Oh, wow.
It was funny you were mentioning documentaries. I just recently watched a documentary on Hemingway. Ken Burns did a thing on Hemingway. And there was a portion where I guess Hemingway was really struggling as a writer, and he's in a new era, I guess the 1950s or the 60s. And there are people just, you know, leapfrogging over him. And he took a long, long hiatus and wrote Old Man and the Sea, which, blew everyone's minds. And I think he won a Pulitzer Prize and whatever. So I say to myself, because I'm sort of in the same boat as you, Molly, I have written a bunch of things for Zoom, but I really don't, Zoom doesn't, it's only as good as the bandwidth, and it's as good as, people watching things from a camera on your laptop or whatever. But I've resolved to just writing for the future. Let's say I can't write for the stage right now or anything to be produced right now, but it will in the future. So, sort of like Hemingway, I'm just going to focus on, writing if it's going to be a year from now or whatever it's going to be. Eventually stage will open up and something needs to be produced. And so I'm just preparing for that future.
Oh, there's going to be a bunch of folks with stuff on the shelf.
Exactly. It reminds me of my grandmother, my late grandmother, who would have she had an apple tree in her farm, and so she would have all these I don't know if people do pickling anymore or people jar things anymore.
I just pickled some red onions yesterday.
Oh, did you? Wow, a millennial who pickles. It's well, my grandmother would have just a shelf full of apples, and just in the future she would fix apple cider, apple butter, apple pie, apple juice, just apple whatever, and she would have that shelf. So we have a shelf full of plays and ideas that that we'll produce in the future.
Go ahead. In that like similar vein of like when I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna kind of start to get back into writing, I went and looked at what was already on the shelf of like drafts that I had just pushed away, didn't feel compelled at the time, and like, okay, maybe I'll come back to it with fresh eyes, because like, what else am I doing right now? I got the time.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. We're hitting close to the 1 hour mark, so I guess video doesn't really impress you, Molly, or you're not like a lot of kids are doing a lot of folks are doing like YouTube videos and Vimeo and that sort of stuff. Have you thought about that at all?
I'm kind of like trying to like push my boundaries. I just wrote a radio play for Awesome Theater. And that was actually like so much more fun than not that I thought it wasn't going to be fun, but like I got a lot more fulfillment and joy out of it than I thought. So now it's like, oh, okay, well, like I do like writing radio plays. So I feel like that's maybe like where I'm going next with it. Cause I think the idea of not trying to force the visual over video is somehow freeing for me.
Is that Anthony Miller?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we should have him on, Reg, at some point.
If you can grab him.
He does a lot of stuff with Piano Fight.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's funny. He would sit in the lobby while I was doing some shows there, and we started talking, and he's just like, "We're doing this and we're doing that," and the base idea of you can have a beer and go see this show seems a little goofy, but no, he's really serious about making great theater, but he wants it accessible in that way.
Yeah. That's the way it should be. Well, all right. I want to be respectful of people's time. Shout outs, birthdays.
Not many. So apparently this is the time of year 9 months ago people just aren't having sex, because I've got a very short list this week.
Speaking of which, did you hear that
Yeah.
California we have a lower population than we've ever had in, I don't know, 70 whatever years.
Yeah, ever. They said California has always grown. This is the first year California shrank. To which I say, yay. Stop complaining about overpopulation and cities burgeoning. And then suddenly when it's not happening, you're like, oh, what are we going to do? We're going to get through this. And we're all going to be happier for a little more space.
I just don't want to lose any more congressional seats. That's all.
That's true. Don't want to do that. So yeah, my short list today. Tim Hart is an actor who I didn't really know. He did a lot of stuff in the South Bay. And when we did Buffalo, Jeannie Baroga's Buffalo down at San Jose Stage, he auditioned for the show. And I just found him to be so wonderful. And then a couple of summers ago when I did SF Shakes, he was understudying the Dukes in As You Like It, both Duke Senior and Duke Frederick. And then they had him as sort of helping. I think I've done that with them before where I'm understudying, but I'm also sort of an extra set of hands for moving the show around from park to park. Anyway, he was back in and I was just so thrilled. So anyway, his birthday is coming up. Joshua Hahn was a young man I met when I got to do the Noodle Factory, this brief moment in Oakland theater history when there was a new performance space, and then the 2008, crash.
The subprime crisis, crashed.
Yeah, and so everything went away. He was part of another theater company that was coming in, and they were becoming a regular. And I was like, I was running the space, so I could totally envision watching these theater companies grow. And I did get to see that company go on to do more stuff. Anyway, Joshua Hahn was one of their crew. J.R. Lewis, and you have to put the R in there because John Lewis is just too common a name. But he was, among other things, our flute and the king, Theseus, in Midsummer Night's Dream that I did a couple of years ago. They were called the Arabian Shakespeare Company. They are now called the Perspective Theater. And we're in dialogue about what that means and where they're going next with it. So we'll see. But John is not just a wonderful actor, wonderfully comic actor. He's also a director. So you may see his name around in that way. Nicole Foster. One of the early lessons I learned as a director, as a producer director, is you're going to see pretty girls. And you're just going to have to go, okay, turn off that part of my brain.
Yep.
Keep focused on the work. And Nicole was one of the first ones that I had to learn that lesson with. I'm like, gosh, she is cute. But she's also a powerful actress, and I believe she is still doing stuff because that was, a long time ago. And then the final one I have is Rob Melrose, who was the founder of Cutting Ball Theater in San Francisco. And he's gone on, I think he's running something in New York now.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, Cutting Ball goes on, but Rob has moved on to bigger and better things. Those are my birthdays for the week. Yeah,
I'm trying to think who was the current person who runs. We had her on, who runs Cutting Ball.
I don't really know her name. I know who you're talking about, though.
Okay. Never mind. So today, Joe Jordan, his birthday is today. He's a magnificent actor. I stage managed him at Central Works. There are a couple of clicks and buttons. Okay, I'm being distracted. But in any case,
I've got sound coming through upstairs. The boy is taking a shower.
Okay,
which he always does with loud music. Sorry.
Mesmeric Revelation. That's the production that Joe Jordan was in, along with Theo Black, and that was at Central Works, and that was in 2012. And I still remember it. It was just a magnificent performance. And Joe Jordan, I believe, is in LA now. But in case, his birthday is today, along with Gianna Capozzi, who was one of the youngest persons to appear on the Yay. She was 16 years old, I believe, when she was on. And she and I and her sister, I forget, Isabella, were in Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. And that was done at the Town Hall Theater, directed by Dawn Monique Williams. It was a wonderful performance. So Gianna, her birthday is today. She's 18. Let's see. I have Brenna Kimberly. I wrote a little mini musical called Nia, and Brenna Kimberly was in that, and she's a fantastic actress in the Bay Area. Her birthday will be May the 10th. Also May the 10th, Dennis Jeter III. He is a trombonist. He used to be a promoter for, I think he was the manager for Wynton Marsalis. He and I graduated from Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and his birthday is on the 10th. Also on the 10th, identical twin brothers, Christopher and Michael Simons. Both are actors. One of them was in. I participated in a group called the Isis Arts Collective, headed up by the late Mike Ward. And Christopher Simons was in. It was a production called The Savage. Great comic actor, tall, really tall. I mean, he's basketball tall, like 6'4", I think. Both the brothers. So in any case, his birthday is on the 10th. Emmanuel Romero, he's a Philippine actor. He's a bindle stiffer. His birthday is on May the 12th. May the 13th, another person who graduated from Duke Ellington along with me, Gary Henderson. I don't think he's doing theater anymore. He became a military man, served our country, and I thank him for his service. May the 13th, also May the 13th, Gina Valeria. I believe she was a director. She was involved with EastEnders. That was a company that I was involved with a long time ago. I have no idea what she's doing these days, but happy birthday, Gina. That's May the 13th. May the 14th, Nick Bain. Nick Bain was in, oh, shucks, my memory's gone bad. Texas Chainsaw Musical.
Oh, wow.
Which was at, we did a,
At the Victoria?
The Willows Theater did it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is a
Back
while
in the
back.
day.
And also, we did a, oh, shucks, it's at the Exit Theater, what is that, the Fringe Festival. We did at the Fringe Festival. That's how I met Nick. Fantastic actor. I'm not sure what he's doing these days. And one last Ellingtonite who also graduated with me, Mark Bollinger. I call him the caveman. He and I were tight friends. He was an artist, visual artist, and he and I graduated at the same time. And his birthday is May the 14th. Also became a career Navy guy, also in the armed services. In
Now,
any case,
why the caveman?
I don't know why he called. Well, you know the commercial. You know the cartoon Captain Caveman. He was a wild guy.
Oh, okay.
And being in a predominantly black school, he was a white guy. And I guess there are all sorts of psychological things that go on. But you know, he found his niche in the arts, and he and I were really close friends. And he and I still talk to this day. So in any case, there's that. Shows.
Ariel Kraft was the. Is that the person that we interviewed?
Kraft? No, I don't think so.
Ariel?
No, I don't think so.
Maya Herbsman?
Maya Herbsman. Yes. Okay.
Associate Artistic Director.
Yeah, and actually, she's also the intimacy coach.
Oh, yay! Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That was a good episode. Any shows? I've got a couple of shows, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. Well, I do have a couple of shows. I have a mixed bag of things. So there's my the playwright, the workshop that I'm going to do for Play Cafe. Directors, your baby's nursemaid. I'm going to talk about what it means to be working with a director when you're a playwright. That'll be on June 6th at 4:00, and I can put you links to this stuff in there. Richard Talavera actually got to do an interview with, Suze Allen, who is a local playwright and coach and theater artist. And she also does this thing now where she's highlighting different local playwrights. So Richard was interviewed this week, and we did a small clip from his play, The Last Breath. So that was kind of fun. So I'm sending you the link for that. And then the Oakland Theater Project, Don Troop said, please, remind people they've got The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. They've done an adaptation of that, and that is up through May 16th. And then coming up at the end of the month, they're going to start a whole another project, and I've got information for that when we get there.
The Wasteland. So what company's doing that?
That's the Oakland Theater Project. And here, I will give you all of that, and you can just copy it out of the...
Cool. So Montalvo Arts, they are doing Love, Lost, and What I Wore. Basically, a bunch of women, the characters are women who are talking about the loves and the losses that they've had in life, and the dresses that they wore. And Eiko Yamamoto is in the play.
Yes.
That'll be May the 12th through the 15th, 6 through 7:30 p.m. I'll have a link to that. Shoot Me When. That is I believe it's a film by our friend Ruben Grijalva.
Ruben Grijalva. It's at the SF Playhouse.
That's right, exactly. Streaming May the 1st through the 27th, and I'll have a link to that. Our House, written by Teresa Rebeck. Deborah Cortez and Terrence Smith is in that. That'll be May the 10th.
Wow.
7 p.m. via Zoom. I think it's only one day, and I don't know the company, but they have a link. So, Storyside 2012 workshop. We've talked about that. Conrad Paganaman is doing a workshop on playwriting. Renabeth Apostle is doing a workshop on acting, and Liling Ao, and we've had her on. She's doing a piece on directing, and so I have a link to that as well. I believe that ends on June the 24th, so you can still sign up. Occupant by Edward Albee. The production is Too Soon Old Productions, directed by our friend Leticia Duarte. That'll be May the 22nd, 23rd, and then 29th and 30th. So 2 weekends. And I'll have apparently there's no email. I'm sorry, there's no video, there's no link, but there is an email. So you have to email to buy a ticket. Theater First is doing More Than Grapes. I wonder if that's still going on. Maybe that's old. This is Jeffrey Lowe is part of this project, exploring the lead up to the Delano grape strike through the legacies of Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Larry Itlong. Do I have anything else? I think that's it.
There's Best of Playground, and when you said the 29th, I realized I'm directing for Best of Playground, and that's coming up. Wow, that's weird. Is that last year's? Here it is. Yes. So I'll get that link and I'll put that in for you too. The 29th and the 30th, 7 o'clock. The best of the last season. The best are the 6 plays that were nominated as the best of the last season. Of course, you're always encouraged to make your own choices around that. But I'm directing Sasha and the Angelier, which is a funny title for a play, but it's a lot of fun.
Very nice. Molly, did you enjoy yourself today?
Oh, I did. This was really fun. Really fun first podcast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on, and the best of luck to your future. I just have a feeling that, every time we have young actors and directors and playwrights, I just have a feeling years and years from now, we're going to hear from them in the future. And I get that vibe from you. So,
well, thank you.
Very much so. Okay. So we are, if you're listening to this on our podcast app, we have our podcast app, but you may be watching this on YouTube. So we have our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and give us some comments in our comment sections. Let us know what you like and what you don't like. And if you have any shows that you want to advertise, let us know. That's how I find out about these things, when people let me know what shows they're going to be doing. If you're just listening to us on our traditional podcast, then you can find us on any podcast app. If you're an iPhone user, there's that purple podcast app that you can listen to us on. And we're on Spotify as well. If you're an Android user, you could use the SoundCloud app, or just go on soundcloud.com and find us. The Yay was created by theater people for theater people. If you have a show you want to advertise, or if you just want to advertise yourself, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm at Reg Space Clay.
And I'm at Who's Your Hoosier.
Molly, do you have any social media that people can follow you on?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at molly.o.k. My initials.
I'm curious, where does Olis come from?
Olis is that's my mom's maiden name. So that's like my Filipino family's last name.
I don't think I've ever heard the name before. I like it.
I have not either. So I feel like we're like the only ones.
Mm-hmm. Did you say that was Instagram, Molly?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And I guess you don't do Twitter?
Not really as like a theater person. I'm just on there to like see what my friends are doing.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And so for those potential producers, owners of theater companies, if you're looking for a budding playwright, you can't go wrong with Molly. And so hit her up. That's it. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful day outside. Hopefully everyone will enjoy yourselves. And of course, happy Mother's Day. My mom got got flowers. And Molly, I wish your mom and your family a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And please wish Mara a happy Mother's Day as well. And with that, as Norman and I always say,
there we go.
there you
ready to go.
Right on. See, you're right on top of it. All right. Thank you so much, folks. And as Norman and I always say,
we gotta find a better sign off.
And we are out.